Other. Yeah. I'm glad they liked it though.
Yeah, they did. It was good. I mean, like, but Joe, like, you are way too passive. You could be like, this could have been done. You could have had the slides look better to pop. You
Right.
could be doing more research on this, right?
Yeah.
Because it has the potential to be great.
Mhm.
Hey, bud.
Boom.
Okay, let me open up the
Quick little throw on. Always do this on Zoom. It's for the performance.
I don't think this presentation is going to be much different than the other one. Like I feel like.
just the opening, just like tease them in the opening.
Yeah. I just feel like I'm like making it seem like the Scoville library is like so much bigger.
You presented to college educators today.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that wasn't much, and you impressed them. All right, I'm going to start letting in people. There's not that many yet. Good evening, everyone. Hey, Lou. How are you, buddy?
Fine, thank you, Ronan. How are you?
Good. We were wondering if you could confirm something for us.
Okay.
Before the portrait was displayed in the Academy building, was it given to the Salisbury Association? What was the origin of that?
I strongly recommend that some of your students or you or somebody come and sit down with Catherine Chilcote, because there is absolutely a story behind it.
Yeah.
And she is the master of the story.
Okay. I can't wait to meet her, by the way. I mean, sit down and chat with her. I mean, it don't matter, but we got to put that before we got wounded. We got to put that back.
Yes. She's the 95-year-old and you and I.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let's set that up, and we can set that up
Cool.
even next week if that's not too soon.
Yeah, we can make something happen. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. We got all the heavyweights on tonight. All the local heavyweights. Let's get one more. When strike 7:30, we'll get started.
Hola, señora.
Hola, buenas noches.
Okay, so we'll just get started. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Scoville Library for helping us promote this and share these stories. My name is Ronan McCrisky, and I work with these gentlemen on searching and uncovering lost, buried, or ignored stories, and then sharing them. So this is an important step in this process. The other thing to add to it is that this course is driven by content, which is what you just explained, skills, practice, authenticity, which is this, and also reflection. But iteration is the biggest part in a lot of ways of the learning. So this is like the first time they're really trotting this out. And so feedback afterwards would be really helpful in terms of like telling the story better, or other questions you might have, other lines of inquiry we might pursue. So this is we're going to polish this more after you hear it, and it should be primed for the Tropic Symposium in April 30th to May 2nd. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Joseph, who will start the evening. Hey.
All right, so I'm gonna be talking about the Winslow mystery, and it's basically about a portrait of a woman that lived locally a long time ago in the 1700s, and in the late 1700s and 1800s, and it just really caught my eye, and I'm going to show you why. So this is a picture of a woman named Maria Coffiing, and was painted in 1844. She was born in 1780, but this painting was found, and we believe in the basement of the town hall, but we're not sure where it was found. But she got married to a man named John Coffiing, and they met together. They met through their families because their families both worked in the iron furnace business. Her house is on Salmon Kill Road, which is like located a little by kind of by the library, right down the road, and the house is still up today. But fairly recently, the painting was cleared off, and it revealed a woman standing in the back, like peeking behind the wall. And this painting was when it was found, it was originally like really, really dusty and kind of like scratched up, and they didn't know why. We didn't really know why it was. Was it intentionally covered, or to keep her out of view? But luckily the reservation report, it was shown that the painting was just trying to be clean, but it was just very clean series of cleaning that was just very poorly, and it just damaged the painting, but eventually got restored, and now it's hanging up in the Historical Association.
What this is going to be interesting later, right? Why? About the artist.
Oh, it was made by an artist named Edwin White, and it'll tie into a couple slides later.
And what are we going to hear in a couple slides later? That's pretty interesting, right?
That they're both made by the same.
Okay, we'll get to it. All right.
Okay. So the woman in the back, her name was Jane Winslow, also known as Jenny. She was born around 1825, and she was living in Dutchess County with her parents, but they died while enslaved when she was only 2 years old. So we don't know how, but somehow she ended up with the Coffiing family when she was 5 years old. And the census said that she was a free colored person between the ages of 10 and 23. But we're not entirely sure, because sometimes it was just said that they were part of the Black people were a part of the family, but oftentimes they had to use like separate staircases and different sinks and different bathrooms, and they weren't really part of the family at all. She's believed to be part of the Coffiing family, but it's still a mystery. Eventually, Maria Coffiing died in 1865 at 85 years old, but Jane still was around to take care of the house for like 5 years after she died. And this is actually a picture of her, a picture of her in her wedding dress. She was getting married to Egbert Lee, And the man Egbert was enslaved in Georgia, but somehow became free and ended up north. We don't have too much information on it, but we believe he escaped through the Underground Railroad. But again, we're not sure. He was a church reverend at the AME Zion Church in Great Barrington, and he actually died only a decade after they got married. And then Jenny shortly died, 1882, a year later.
Okay, take a drink of water. All right, so one thing that I think we want to share is this painting actually is a lot more complex than we initially thought. And as Joseph has kind of explained, when we first looked at this, we thought we had seen images like this before. For example, here. What are we looking at here, Joseph?
This is a picture. It's called Family Group in the Landscapes, made by Franz Hals. And this painting jumped out to me because it was in a TED talk that I saw by a man named Titus Kaffar. And it's a painting of just a family, but there's a black boy in the back, and we don't really know his significance. And he's just like in the background. Like there's more written about the lines on the woman's dress and the dog that's in the corner than there is about the boy in the back. And it's interesting. This one's interesting. It stands out from a lot of portraits back then because he's actually looking at the camera. Most pictures of black people, they weren't looking at the camera. The artist, sorry.
That's good.
So further through history, we've seen this. There's no, in the first Wedgwood anti-slavery medallion, that there's no white people, and there's the first like picture or first representation of a black man in art that doesn't have a white person around in Western art. And it was made by a British potter named Josiah Wedgwood for the Society for the Abolition of Slave Trade. But the man is like, he's kneeled down and he's chained up and he's begging, like, looks like he's begging for mercy. And it says, "Am I not a man or a brother?" And yeah, it's just showing that he's enslaved and powerless. But then a little later, this statue of Forever Free made by Edmonia Lewis. It's a man breaking chains. He has his fist up in the air. There's a little girl next to him, like maybe thanking God with their hands together. He's standing on the weight that once held his chains, and he's just pictured free. So this is the main picture that really, really jumped out to me. And it was originally called Thoughts of the Future. And the artist is Edwin White. So Edwin White was the same artist that painted the picture we did, the painting we just saw before with Jane Winslow and Maria Coffiing at. And he's depicted holding a newspaper or reading a newspaper, which is like kind of radical because Black people, like if you were literate, you could get killed in some parts of the United States. So it's like a really controversial painting. And in the background, the only door in the house, there's a picture on it that says Haiti. And Haiti is significant because it was the first successful slave revolt. It was the first successful slave revolt in history. And it was, yeah, so all the Black people and the enslaved people revolted and killed their masters. And it was a really long rebellion for about 10 years. And a man named Robert Stewart, who was a sugar farmer, he was a sugar farmer, so he relied on slave labor. So he didn't want to see people he didn't want to see this painting and it being called Thoughts of the Future. And he wanted to rename it, so he renamed it Dreams of Liberia instead. So maybe they didn't get ideas. But Liberia isn't mentioned anywhere in this painting at all, but it's significant because it's where the Back to Africa movement is, and because Liberia is in the western part of Africa, and
safer.
It was a safe option instead of revolting and going to Haiti.
So that was Joseph's. Why don't we stop here for questions? Any thoughts for Joseph or comments about or questions that came up in the course of this, or tips for next time would be really, really helpful. So unmute yourselves and ask. Go ahead, Lou.
I have some bad news.
What's that?
the story about it being unclean and we didn't know what was there and all the rest.
No. We didn't say we didn't know it was there. We used the preservation report, and I think you said, right?
Mhm.
That in the preservation report, they said that it had been miscleaned.
Oh, okay.
He stated that. That Joseph cited that even. We used anyhow. So yes, it was not obscured intentionally. It was meant to be clean, and the restorer removed all the toxins that they had tried to clean it with, and that's how she came out.
Because there has been a story that has circulated about the fact that when it came to us, we didn't see her there because it hadn't been cleaned properly, and
Right.
it was only revealed by the conservator. And unfortunately, that's not true.
Right.
It's sexy, but it's not true.
Right. No, we did initially think that, but the preservation report, which Joseph cites at the end of this, shows that clearly that wasn't the case. And even there were images before where she was kind of grayed out, but you
Right.
can see her there.
Right.
What else, Lou? Give him something else.
I hesitate at this moment because I think that the level of their discovery when they meet with Catherine will be high.
Okay, fair. Anyone else? Nothing, Lucy? Come on.
I did have something sparked, maybe not being a native or growing up in this country, I don't have such a strong American history. And when he said that African Americans were potentially killed if they were literate, I had never heard that, and it sparked more curiosity. So I would have liked to learn more when that changed. When did Black people in this country start being allowed to read or learn or go to schools? You know, I know about desegregation school, but that's so much later.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just something that popped up.
What do you think?
Oh, that was in the antebellum South, and in some states it was much stronger than others. Like in South Carolina, the laws were really strong against allowing literacy because it could, communication is freedom, could lead to it. So, but it was, variously practiced before the Civil War, but after the Civil War, it was not. It was literacy. There's poverty and other things that was driving illiteracy.
Yeah. Thank you.
And you're going to hear next a report about Elizabeth Mars, and so this painting was in 1861, and Joseph's point still remains. I mean, the fact that a Black man's reading a paper, and that's the focus of this, is very radical. But James Mars from Connecticut, right around that same year, wrote the book James Mars, A Slave Bought and Sold in Connecticut. So, literacy was not, uncommon, particularly in northern places.
No, but it's interesting. I noticed such a difference in style with dream. It's a lot. Dreams of Liberia is illustrative, almost as though it's for a magazine or something, whereas our the portrait is a classic portrait style. Yeah, very different.
The other thing we learned was that these were in an art festival in Paris, along with this. And what you want to talk about that, Tico?
Oh yeah. One thing that kind of I was looking at the picture and I was thinking, maybe the boiling pot was maybe symbolizing the sort of the creation and stir up of the rising tensions of the revolution.
Oh, that's a good thought, and everything about that painting seems to be there's messaging all over it, so that makes really good sense.
Any other thoughts?
One of the things that is remarkable is the number of summers that Edwin White spent here in Salisbury. And that same year that is attributed to the painting of Mariah Coffiing, he did a number of different portraits 4 of which we have at the Academy Building in Salisbury. He did a posthumous portrait of John Milton Hawley. He did a number of different portraits, and I'd be curious to know whether there's any sort of philosophical connection between his time here and ultimately where he went politically or philosophically in his paintings.
This seemed to be a one and off in our research. This was by far kind of the most radical. He did one of Washington turning in his commission. That was kind of grand. But this was the only one that kind of had this kind of revolutionary push in it. And that, again, it makes us wonder why Jenny Winslow was included. Were there any other Black figures in any other paintings, Lou, off the top of your head?
Not that I know of that were done locally, no.
Yeah, interesting.
Can I ask
Okay.
a question?
Of course, we would love it.
Thank you. Is there any evidence in Salisbury or around Salisbury of participation in the Underground Railroad?
It's interesting. When we first this course was first conceived in my head, it was going to be an Underground Railroad course because I was convinced with the Housatonic River and Route 7 that there were terminals here. But I was working with this professor from Ohio State, and it was the summer of George Floyd, and I told him about this idea, and he said, Ronan, like, Underground Railroad stories are great, but a lot of them have been told. Like push your kids to find the Black stories that haven't been told in your community. So I haven't really looked. I was intrigued, but I haven't really looked. I will say that the Underground Railroad, like from the South, that traditional pipeline, I'm not sure about that, but Sages Ravine from New York into Massachusetts, which was free, was probably was transited in the late 1700s. So, and actually, if you go to the Ashley House, there's some account books and some debits with no credits ever paid back that people suspecting that might have been Underground Railroad. All right, Rusto, Gray, you ready? All right, so this is a treat because that was the Elizabeth Mariah Coffiing painting, but we're going to do a twofer tonight. And why don't you guys introduce yourselves and hit it?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gray Bauer.
I'm Rusty Chandler.
And today we're going over the story of Elizabeth Mars. So before we get started, has anybody here heard of the Mars family? I see some hands. Great. So basically the reason why this family is so remarkable, Jupiter Mars, with the help of his sons, they bought themselves out of slavery and bought a home in Pittsfield, Mass. I mean, already the story gets kind of crazy, a Black man owning property at the time was not a common aspect. And to further go into that, each member of the family has their own incredible story. Jupiter fought in the American Revolution. James Mars was a political activist and deacon in a church in Hartford. He's also the one, like Mr. McCrisky mentioned, that wrote the book called A Slave Bought and Sold in Connecticut. But though remarkable, this story is not about them. This is a story of Elizabeth Mars, the youngest in the Mars family. So in the book, there wasn't really any material we can find about her. So Rusty and we took a deeper dive, and her story's incredible, very, very interesting, especially because it took place right in our backyard, Canaan, Connecticut. I mean, that's remarkable. So let's get into it. She was, as we were saying, she was born to formerly enslaved parents in Norfolk, Connecticut. And we believe she likely traveled to the Hartford area because of her brother James, who, like I said, was a deacon in the Hartford's Talcott Street Church. She was raised in the home of Thomas H. Gallaudet. Are you guys familiar with the Gallaudet University? Yeah, so very, very famous university. Well, at the time, he was the founder for the Asylum for the Deaf and Dumb, which is basically like an education asylum for the deaf and dumb. So that's where she was raised. And from there, she went to Pennsylvania, where she was actually taught to read and write by Quakers. And then she became a school teacher in the infant school in Hartford. So already Elizabeth's story is really heating up. I mean, as we were saying before, it's pretty rare to have an educated Black person at this time, right? And not only that, but she was also a teacher at an infant school in Hartford. So that was pretty amazing. And later she married a man by the name of William Johnson. And at the time he was in an African missionary school. And kind of the purpose of the school, it was started by the Episcopal Church to essentially train missionaries to go over to Liberia and kind of evangelize the gospel, right, all over these colonies of Liberia, because that's kind of the biggest mission of the church, right, is evangelization. So when they hear that, you know, there's going to be all these new colonies opening up in Liberia and everything, they wanted to get there. So they started this school and they started educating people on missionary work. Eventually, Johnson was picked by the Episcopal Church to take part into the trip to Liberia with two other men whom took their wives. So that's how Elizabeth kind of got integrated in this trip.
Yeah, and then from there, the trip faced a lot of public backlash. So Mars and her husband were put through more schooling in New York for preparation for the trip. And quickly, does anyone know what the Back to Africa movement is? I know a little, you heard a little bit from Joseph's presentation, but it was a movement that was popular or it was an idea that was popular in the early 1800s. And it was the concept of freeing the enslaved and shipping them back to Africa. This was a popular idea amongst some white America because they were worried about what recently happened in Haiti. And what happened in Haiti was there was a major slave revolt where a lot of enslavers from Haiti were killed. And the Back to Africa movement might resonate with Elizabeth because we found an article, it's called Call to Witness by Anne Wemberly. And it's saying all the reasons, and these are a couple. She looked upon Africa as her ancestral home. She might have want to contribute to spread the gospel and contribute to the quality of life among those whom she considered her own people. And also it says, quote, they might also prove to be pathfinders who created new ways of serving as women. And so she makes the trip and lands herself in Cape Palmas, Liberia. She then works for 34 years educating Liberian people with over 90 students in her class every year. And she got to a point where she was frustrated because she was almost doing too good of a job, to where she was providing literacy for her students, to where the parents of her students would pull their child out of school before she could make a lasting impact of them, because she was like teaching them too fast, and she really wanted to make an impact on them, and she didn't think she was doing that. And then so after those 34 years, she returned to America for the final time in Hartford with James Mars. And according to her brother, James Mars, she inspired him to write his book, which is the book.
A Man Bought and Sold in Slavery.
Yeah. And then from there, she returns to Cape Palmas, where she spends a year teaching. And then she resides in St. Mark's Hospital, where she dies in August of 1964. And from there was a huge funeral for her. It says, you're looking at a passage that we found that I'm sure you can read it, but it just describes how like lavish her funeral was, and it's like the mark of an important figure in Liberia dying, and like a lasting like global. It's so interesting how a person from Canaan, Connecticut has a global impact.
I mean, yeah, she like, they basically threw a parade in her honor, right? Because she had such an amazing impact on these colonies, which is, as Rusty said, like she came from right in our backyard, Canaan, Connecticut. Like that's amazing, right? But to further go to that, as I was saying before, the Episcopal Church sent the men over to become the missionaries, right? That was kind of their focus, and they kind of predicted that like the men would be making the big impacts and everything like that. So then we actually found this letter who was written by Jackson Kemper, who is the secretary. You can read it, the Secretary of Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society, right? And here he like literally admits that Elizabeth Mars had such an impacting role in this trip that he actually calls the men in the trip old man dullards. How incredible is that? Like the role of women at this time, right? They didn't really expect much from them going over to these colonies, and the fact that she went over and made such a big impact, it really caught the interest of the Episcopal Church, which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and then after he said that, he says Elizabeth's gonna be a star. Like she's gonna make the show. And that's all we have for you guys.
Okay, thank you, boys. That was really good. That's getting tight. Any feedback or questions for them? Go ahead, Lou.
Question, I noticed that in one of those slides, it mentioned the Caesar family, Elizabeth Caesar and her husband, I think William. Were they at all related to the Caesar family that was here in Salisbury?
It's different spelling, so no is our
Okay.
strong assumption. And Caesar was a pretty common question. Go ahead, Rich.
Can you say, maybe I missed this at the beginning, can you say a little bit more about the sources of your information? Were these minutes from the Missionary Society? Were they correspondence? Was it James Mars that recorded, the story of his sister? I mean, what exactly, what kind of sources did you have for this information?
Yeah, so kind of early on into the project, we actually found another historian who reached out to a bunch of archives, and he kind of wrote like little excerpts here and there about like Elizabeth Mars. So we pulled a lot of our information from those and kind of pieced the timeline together. And then from there
But Greg, hold on. Where was that guy from who helped us, who was so kind to help us? That's Rich's question. Do you remember?
not.
He was an Episcopalian minister. We reached out to the church, Rich, and what the parade source is actually from an Episcopal accounting a history of Liberian missionaries.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. But Gray emailed them, and they didn't just respond with email. They sent us the book to borrow. They were very excited that we were
nice
looking into this story.
Yeah.
And then to kind of piece the rest together, we were emailing, other archives,
Right.
To just kind of finalize our story.
And James Mars, in his autobiography, credits his sister.
Does he talk about that, his sister a lot in there? Okay. Yeah.
Only in the very beginning. He says, "My
Very
sister was
briefly.
back for Africa and said, you have an amazing story. You should write it down." That's
okay.
how it, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Other questions?
Anything else? Does Tracy Moore have a question?
I don't know why you did that.
That's Rusty's mom. So I'm putting them both on the spot. Okay, well, we're still piecing this mystery together, all these mysteries. So if you have any thoughts, please send them our way. And May, thank you for the platform, for the opportunity to share these stories. The boys are also researching the School for Imbeciles, which is also fascinating. Their group is researching anti-Semitism internationally, nationally, and locally, which is a tough topic, but an important one. And we have a group of students tracing the Pequot Wars and the local links there, including the story Lou put us onto, that the last battle of King Philip's War was, according to a Rudd source, was fought on the Sheffield-Salisbury border. Do you have any last thank yous for you?
Yeah, I want to give my thanks to Miss Baldwin, because she really went out of her way to help get my project like going in the right direction, and without her it would have gone very different way, and who knows what it would have been like.
And yeah, and Joan is a hero for this type of work for countless students, but also it's like the local everyone has been so helpful. Heidi Holler, who owns the house that the doctors who started the School for Imbeciles has opened her doors. Lou and Rich and just really, I love the fact that this community is so open and willing to share. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to wrap it up, May? Or are we good?
Well, I would like to say, could I ask you, could you tell us more about how we can participate when you have your final Troutbeck talk?
So the Troutbeck Symposium is going to be April 30th, which is a Sunday, and May 1st and 2nd. Students will be presenting primarily on May 1st. But there will be a series of smaller meets, like with local historians, local educators, local interested parties, and so as we nail that down, we'll be sending those invites out. But if you're interested, we want you there. So let me know, and it won't be a difficult ask to get in to hear these students present. We're also going to live stream it. Our Instagram account is Coloring Our Past. And we have a social media team that is publishing these stories and getting them out there. And Lou, who's doing the Salisbury Association Instagram?
It's brand new, and
Yeah.
I think she was participating. Helen Ross.
Helen has been killing it on the
Helen,
Salisbury.
One
Yeah.
who's sort of merging all of them together. So God bless her.
Yeah, she's doing a great job.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
So we're going to live stream it too on Instagram Live when we get to April 30th, May 1st, and May 2nd. Lucy, are you proud of Gray?
Yeah.
All right.
Always.
Anything else?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for being open ears to these stories. It means a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting. Wonderful job. Thank you.
All right. Take care,
Ronan,
everyone.
I'll be in touch about scheduling that meeting.
I look forward to that, Lou. That'd be great. Thanks, buddy.
Yep.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye-bye.